Time is indeed short. Hello everybody and welcome back to the finale of the Shadow of the Colossus playthrough. Oh boy, this is going to be a long part, but it's the finale, so it's only right that we take our time and go properly ahead into this finale. So yes, we have come a long way, and our final Colossi awaits straight ahead of us. It's going to take us a while to get there, but that just gives us a little bit of time to just look back at where we've come from and how much we've done. We've killed 15 Colossi, for better or for worse. Because most of them seemed peaceful and it seems kind of awful that, you know, we killed them. But then it's all been done for love. So, do the ends justify the means? Maybe, who knows? And obviously, in this part, you're gonna get sort of my final thoughts on Shadow of the Colossus and the remake and everything. But I think just while we run towards the location of the final Colossi, it's only right that we sort of go over the names of all of those original, well, all those other Colossi that have since departed. We began with Valus, then came Quadratus, then Gaius, Phaedra, Avian, Barba, Hydrus, Kuramori, Basran, Dirge, Celosia, Pelagia, Phalanx, Zenobia, and Argus. And now it is time to run to our final one. There were meant to be a few more Colossi in the game. So one of them was called Devil, or Pholux, as fans called it, which was a very strange looking Colossi. It had wings, it sort of roamed about. It's quite an interesting fight. Then you had Griffin, or Caius, as fans called it, which also has a sort of very interesting appearance. I mean, it is very much Griffin-like. But the joints were going to act as obstacles, and it'd take a while to get onto the Colossi's back. And then that was where you were going to kind of do the challenge. But I think because it took so long to get up onto the Colossi's back, they decided to bin Griffin from the game. Then there was Monkey, that didn't make it in. But it didn't get another name by the fans, so it's just called Monkey, like the developers did. And effectively, it hung from the ceiling, and I think you kind of had to, yeah, defeat it by dropping it to the floor, and that's kind of quite a fun way of doing it. You had Phoenix, which was also named Adar Flam. The idea behind it was that its body was wreathed in flame, and you defeated it by plunging it into a lake. And sort of there's a screenshot which got Wonder riding on aggro, and yeah, Phoenix looks quite fun, like it could have been quite fun, but I think it's mentioned that it was removed for being overpowered, and also because it required a huge arena because of its attacks. Then you had Rock, or Avis, which was actually cut during the final stages of the game. I assume because it was another bird-type Colossus. It's very similar to Avian, so I think they thought, let's not. Then you had Sirius, which is another one that made it quite far, but then got cut. And that was just because the way of defeating it just wasn't working out. It's sort of like a warthog boar type Colossi, which looks quite fun. Then you had Spider, or Ebirth, as the fans called it, which is very much like a daddy long legs. And basically what you do was lead it from water to the land, and then I think you were then able to hit weak spots and kind of destroy its legs and then climb it. And then the last one was the Worm, or Dianon, as fans called it. So it had a flower bulb-like section, which was the weak point, but there weren't any other sort of bits of information about how that worked. But we're right now at the location of the final Colossi, and oh no, aggro! And so our beloved horse is no more. Aggro has been an amazing help through our journey, but she sacrificed herself right at the end to get us to our final destination. I know that for a lot of people that is a sort of really truly emotional moment in the game, and I think it's because for a lot of people it really did come as a surprise. People were not expecting the game to just kill off Aggro in its final moments, and I think the reason that I perhaps didn't feel quite as emotional as I would do normally was, I think, because I knew it was coming, and the whole scene's probably not long enough for me to, like, properly emotionally deal with it, I suppose might be a way of describing it. I'm not quite sure. It's an odd one. Normally I'm a proper crier. Wow, that was an impressive fall. Yeah, normally I'm a proper crier. I get really emotionally invested in things, and then just all the emotions just come out whenever there's a sort of emotional moment in the game. But for some reason this time, it didn't happen. And I don't know why, because I know that it's a very powerful moment, and one that I think it's done very well and is sort of very beautiful and sad. But yeah, I don't know. It might have just been where my headspace was at the time, maybe going a little bit emotionally numb again. I don't know. But as we climb these stairs, we're going to come face to face. Well, we've got a bit further to go, but once we've climbed these pillars, we're going to come face to face with the final Colossi of the game. And there he is. this is Malus, and he's easily the toughest Colossi to reach. Easily, without a doubt. You're going to see more than a few deaths from me as I try to take on Malus, because he's a difficult one to suss out. And he's very deadly because he fires these bolts at you, and it's all quite terrifying. And if you're not expecting things, then it's quite easy to get blindsided. And he's actually not all that difficult once you're on his body, but getting to him is sort of the challenging bit, because I mean, like here, I was just like, wait, where is he? It's very easy to get disoriented, and yeah. And then I got to this bit, I was just like, wait, where am I going? And then Wanda just takes a long time to get back up, because obviously he's absolutely buggered up at this point. And yeah, it took me a while to figure out exactly where I was meant to go, because it's so easy to get hurt in this. And if you get caught once, you're pretty much screwed. Although I am quite glad that I screwed it up this time, because what it allowed me to do was actually find, not collect, but find one of the coins that was added in. Look, there we go, special coin that was added to this game. It's one of the new collectibles that was added. Unfortunately, I fell off, so I couldn't pick it up again. And then very soon after this, yeah, Wanda's pretty much going to die. And there we go. Death number 1 for dealing with Malus. As I said, getting through this is a bit of a challenge. Wasn't the most impressed on the whole with this as the final Colossi fight. I found most of the others a lot more enjoyable, and I think it's just because they weren't so disorienting in the grand scheme of things. You could sort of see where you needed to go and figure out the puzzle that way, whereas this is, you're constantly under attack, and it's very different. And then actually when you get to Malus, it's just very platformy and very puzzly rather than an actual challenge once you're there. So Malus isn't my favourite Colossi, not by a long shot, but I really do like the atmosphere and everything. It's quite epic, and the song that plays throughout it is quite haunting as well, I suppose, because it's Demise of the Ritual. After you kind of go through the gates that leads to Malus, you get Sanctuary, and then after Aggro sacrifices herself, you get Resurrection. But yes, throughout the battle is Demise of the Ritual, and it's yeah, quite haunting. But yes, in terms of name, Malus, it's pretty basic stuff. It's just the Latin word for bad. It does have a few other meanings, but obviously we're going with the Latin for bad. The Latin name that was given to it is Grandis Supernus. Grandis means great in height, and Supernus means upper or high, which, as a rough translation, means that Grandis Supernus means the great high man. So obviously the whole gist is that he's really big. And I mean, he is really big. He's the tallest of all the Colossi by far. He is 196.8 feet, and I really colossally screwed up there. Really colossally screwed up. But yes, that means that Malice is almost twice the height of the next tallest Colossi, and over 30 times the size of Wonder. He isn't the biggest Colossus. Dirge is 260 feet long, Hydrus is 280 feet long, and Phalanx is 557 feet long, which means that they're all longer than he is taller. But Malice is definitely the most massive and definitely the heaviest of all of the Colossi, due to not only his great height, but also that sort of enormous bulk. And to give that height some scale, if Malice were actually real, then he'd be tall enough to look directly into the clock face of Big Ben. So yeah, he's pretty gigantic. But yes, one of the things that I found out in looking at the Team Ico wiki is that actually it is possible to perform a very specific series of runs and jumps that allow you to run right up to Malice. And that means that you then don't have to worry about going through all these tunnels and getting all disoriented. But it's extremely difficult to pull off because you're sort of dodging fireballs, you're jumping, running, all sorts, but it can save you quite a lot of time if you're doing the game in time attack mode. And yeah, it's going to take me I think a few more tries to actually reach Malice, but once we reach Malice we should be okay. It's just the trial and error of getting there that was the problem, because like you get to this area and yeah, Malice is pretty close and he can definitely see you, and as you're about to see, yeah, I was quite a grumpy Gus when that happened. Because you really do get flung back by that thing. And then you have to look at the cutscene again, and yeah, it was this point where I was just like, should I just, you know, cut out all the failed takes on Malice, or do I leave them in? But I thought, well, I've left Dirge in. The whole point of this playthrough is that it's a blind playthrough, it's the first play, and because I don't do that much, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to leave them in. It's going to make this part obviously quite a lot longer than it would have been normally, because that's like 7 or 8 minutes, which would have meant that this part would have been sub 50 otherwise. But hey, you get to see sort of the frustrations that I had in terms of getting to Malice, and I think because it's not necessarily entirely clear that you can, well, I mean, obviously it's clear that you can die in those locations, but is the fact that you are really just repeating the same steps time and time again as you try and get to Malice if you die, and it just makes that sort of run up not quite as fun. It's really where I would say that Shadow of the Colossus does, as a game, fall a little bit flatter than it would do otherwise. Like I would say, apart from perhaps the controls, which you can get used to, and the camera, everything else is just really enjoyable. I love all the puzzles of the Colossi, I love the challenges of all the Colossi, some more than others obviously, but I like the idea of all the other Colossi. But Malice, I don't feel quite so comfortable with, and I think it's a shame that Malice is the way he is as the final Colossus, because it's a haunting final boss, but it's not quite as epic, I suppose, as I would have liked. And I think part of that lack of epicness is entirely related to the fact of it's just very easy to get slightly buggered over as you're running about. And I mean, just look at that. I fell down there and I was just like, really? Really, Malice? We're going to play in that game now? And I suppose it made me all the more stubborn to actually defeat him, but I think probably what is part of the problem is that I have been really spoiled with video game final bosses for a very long time. Like, I look at Jubileus from Bayonetta, and the fact that this happened twice was just like, really? Really? But yeah, Jubileus in Bayonetta, Jigging in The Wonderful 101, those are probably my two. Like, the Bowser fight in Super Mario Odyssey. Just to name a few, obviously. And they're just sort of these amazing spectacles, which is obviously what this is going for in terms of its sense of scale, but it's just not as effective. And I think part of that is because Demise of the Ritual is just a haunting piece of music rather than anything particularly extravagant. It becomes more extravagant once, you know, you get to the bottom of Malice. But part of me feels like, really, this bit of Malice should have just been the fight rather than the journey towards him. Because that journey was just frustrating rather than anything actually satisfying. And then I think the other thing that slightly frustrates me then with Malice is that that first bit is like really challenging for no good reason, and then actually the rest of the climb up Malice is not that terrifying. Like, that there's very little challenge to getting up these first bits, like getting up the skirt, so to speak, of Malice. And I say, even when you get to the top of Malice, even then he's not that difficult. And I think that's also what frustrated me, because I would have preferred the challenge to be the other way around. Make getting to Malice like relatively easy, because I don't need to worry about that. Make taking down Malice the challenge. And then also there are, I think, some slightly buggy manoeuvres, because you've got to jump from Malice's back to his hand, and then I think a lot of people end up getting slightly flabbergasted by the hands, because obviously he keeps moving them, and you don't want him to do that, because then you can't actually get him to stay. But if you stab him, which isn't clear that you can do because they've not got that mark on them, like on his arm there, which is obviously what we're going to, there's that whole kerfuffle of you don't necessarily realise that you can get him to stop, and so I think a lot of people got confused by that. And then here you've got to do another of those sort of backward jumps, but it's can be a bit of a challenge to actually pull off, because once again it's a little bit buggy. and yeah, if you don't time it well, then you end up falling off, and so there's the whole thing with this bit is that this isn't actually challenging, it's just that the game and the controls aren't necessarily all working in the fashion that you want them to, and it can be slightly difficult to see when you've made the jump, because obviously everything that's going on, and yeah, I know a lot of people feel rather mixed about Malice. It's a difficult one, and then also this was a sort of very terrifying moment, because it was just like, oh god, I need to stand, otherwise I'm going to, you know, completely lose my grip. But thankfully, I managed to sort of get well positioned enough that I could stand and stab him long enough in order to get up. But actually, stabbing his hand is how you're meant to progress, which I think a lot of people also got confused about, because you've got to shoot him in the shoulder just over there, and the only way that you're going to have enough time to do that is by stabbing his hand, because then he puts it up here. I don't know why he wouldn't, you know, shake you off when you stabbed him, because that would make more sense, but yeah, once you get to around here, Malice is really nothing. Because while he'll try and shake you off, and I think if you're not careful, there is every possibility that he will just fling you so far off that you have to do a lot of the fight again. And I think in like the PS3 remaster, there was a sort of slight bug because of the shift to 60 frames per second. He became a lot more challenging because he just would not quit in terms of getting your attacks down on him. So it just became a really unpleasant fight. As it stands in the remake here, I think that it's definitely okay in terms of the controls. But he does move his head a little bit too much. And I feel bad for sort of being quite down on Shadow of the Colossus at this point, because obviously I've given it so much praise and I really do love it as a game, but just this sort of final battle, just wasn't feeling it. Thankfully, the ending more than makes up for this final battle, so it's all okay in the end. Quite literally. I think 2 more stabs to the head should probably do it, but I just wanted to drop back and regain a bit more of my grip ability, because I thought, you know what, he's going to be really, really frustrated in those sort of final few moments, so I just want to have as much grip as is humanly possible in order to get my stab on, and I think 1 more stab should do it, and then our final Colossi will be defeated, and the ritual will be complete. So come on, Malice. Stop delaying the inevitable. It's over. I mean, it's quite impressive that Wanda managed to, you know, collapse in midair, but hey, I'm not going to complain.
Eldorani. I'm not screwed at the bar. But home formulas illegal at all. Irom de kekulutu. No sus if inkafiwo. Was I not tickle? It was you. You want to lie, Luludo? Look at the law in your own. You must almost rude. Okay. What is I don't concord? Or is your could do? You will kill you. It was no Katayu.
And so the final twist is revealed. Dorman was just using us to resurrect himself. And Wanda went along with it to resurrect Mono, but it turns out maybe it wasn't enough, and now Wanda's been taken over by the spirit of Dorman, becoming this hideous monster. And I have to say, as much as I complained about Wanda's face throughout this playthrough, these sort of final moments, this kind of amazing twist that is iconic in gaming, was just like, his face in those sort of final moments is just amazing. Like, all the moaning that I had about it beforehand was just, it was worth it for those sort of, that final look, because it just looked so effective and so haunting. And part of me wishes that I hadn't known what happened at the end of Shadow of the Colossus, because I think that would have made this so much more impactful, to know that we were doing wrong the entire time. It might have felt wrong killing the Colossi, but to be proven that we really were doing wrong, it's just, it really does make this just a really haunting and tragic game in the grand scheme of things. It really does. And so, in our final moments of gameplay, we get to try and fight against the pull of that water. Our demise is inevitable. There is no way that Wanda can defeat this. But you do get a trophy if you manage to resist it for a minute. And I believe it's probably a bit over a minute, because we're certainly going to try and resist it right now for a minute. And I am pretty damn certain that I did last a minute here, but I don't think the game wanted to play ball. But yeah, this is just a truly heartbreaking moment. Everything was done by Wanda to rescue Mono, and in the end, he's just cruelly getting dragged away from her. The light vanishing and just falling into that pool of nothingness. Slightly hilariously, you can do these quick jumps to make pretty decent progress, but after a certain point, you just have to give in to the pull. And so, wonder is no more. And so, we've reached the end of Shadow of the Colossus. And obviously what makes the game even more tragic is that Dormin wasn't lying. Dormin followed through with its end of the bargain. It resurrected Mono, but now she's trapped in these forbidden lands forever. And it really does make you sort of... it really does just rip your heart apart. And I mean also the fact of Aggro survived. Aggro truly is the best horse in gaming, without a shadow of a doubt. And as we roll through these credits, I just have to say, yeah, Shadow of the Colossus is a really stunning, spectacular game. I think this remake is a particularly excellent example of a remake. I mean, Bluepoint Games really have outdone themselves. And I think they are pretty much your go-to people now for porting and remastering and remaking games, because I think they really do know what they're doing, because this is just brilliant, and I think it's a really worthy remake of the original game. Obviously, I've never played the original game, but it felt like it really did honour that original vision. It just made sort of a few tweaks to sort of perhaps the visual style, and then a few tweaks for the better to the gameplay, and so on and so forth. But it was just a really fascinating experience, because obviously Shadow of the Colossus is held in very high regard by most of the gaming community, and I definitely see that. I definitely get how people feel the way they do about this game. I'm not sure whether personally it sits in that sort of same god tier echelon as others hold it in, and I say that's only because some of the gameplay controls and some of the camera work in the actual game do come across as being rather antiquated. The sort of massive abandoned open world, while very fitting in terms of the context, is just not... The whole thing with open worlds is that they're more interesting when there's more in them, but the shrines, the lizards, they're not enough to make the rest of the world feel worth exploring. So really you feel like you should just go straight to all the Colossi, and then there's all this work on this sort of beautifully tragic world that just doesn't get explored. But yes, maybe one day if he survived, we'll be able to atone for his sins. But poor Molo and Agro forced to exist in this place. And there's nothing they can do to escape. They are stuck here forever. But yes, obviously, a few kind of continued cutscenes throughout this, which is also definitely makes you want to watch the credits. It's always something that's quite an effective use of credits, I feel. But yes, and there we have a rather terrifying demon baby. Which ultimately is Wanda reborn. And most people see this as the origins of the demon boys from Ico. So Shadow of the Colossus, while a sort of spiritual sequel, is in fact a spiritual prequel to that game in the Ueda trilogy. And I think it does just make the sort of the ending of this game really interesting and fascinating, and I think it's one of the reasons why this game did end up sticking with a lot of people, and it will stick with me as well, because it's that whole thing of taking down the Colossi, and they're all quite spectacular, and then you've got just that brilliant twist at the end, where you when you realise that Dormin was just playing for you for a fool so that he could be resurrected. But then he actually followed through with his end of the bargain, and Mono was revived, and it just makes it a truly tragic game, with some kind of beautiful moments in it. And while obviously I do have complaints with Shadow of the Colossus, particularly sort of that final boss, this ending is just stunning and spectacular, and I really do love it and appreciate it, and part of me wishes that I didn't know what was going to happen before I played the game, to kind of get to experience that completely fresh, because I think it would have had a much greater impact on me had I experienced it completely blind. But then, hey, that's what happens when a game's out for like well over a decade. It's very difficult to avoid spoilers in those instances. And you're bound to find out some things, but still, it's a really beautiful and tragic ending. I mean, just look at all these creatures. Part of what makes me feel a little bit sad is that ultimately Mono may end up having to eat some of these creatures, but if they've been able to survive, then that means that there should be enough stuff for Agro and Mono and the resurrected, reborn Wanda to survive in this place until they can perhaps find a way to escape. And as the eagle flies away, our story and our time with Shadow of the Colossus is finally over. And as we leave behind the Forbidden Lands, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this playthrough. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've liked seeing a sort of slightly different perspective to probably a lot of other people's when it comes to Shadow of the Colossus. And I hope you've enjoyed seeing perhaps a different side to me doing a playthrough and sort of doing it more blind. In terms of the gameplay, and just seeing a lot more of that trial and error and that learning process, because it's been an interesting one for me to do, and I'm very glad that I did do it. And as I said, I hope that you've enjoyed it. So, really, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you'll join me in the next playthrough. See you next time.